Lesson 17, Third Declension Continued, the Ablative of Time. Welcome back to Lenny's Latin class. Today we're at the bottom of page 51, and today we'll be working on the third declension yet again, and we'll be learning a new way to use the ablative case. So let's jump right in. I want to look at sections 154 and 155 together because they really talk about the same thing. And the way they describe it here in section 154, in that little title there, it says special singular endings. And then for 155 it says special plural endings. That's true, they are special endings, but the subject here really being talked about is what we call I-stem nouns of the third declension. In a more modern Latin textbook, remember this particular textbook is over 100 years old. In a more modern Latin textbook, this would simply be labeled I-stem nouns of the third declension, or third declension I-stems. Why are they called I-stems? I'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, I want to just cover some of these endings with you that you're going to see. And I just want to do this quickly because I want to talk about this in a different way than the way they present it here. But in section 154, what they're telling you here is that some third declension nouns are going to have, in the accusative singular, instead of em, you might see im. And there are a few nouns in Latin that have that ending as sort of a traditional ending. Like the word pupus here, that's the stern of a ship. Like we get our English term poop deck. It's like that raised area at the back of a ship. And the word turris there, that means like a tower. Navis, of course, you already know that. That's a ship. So for a small group of nouns from the third declension, you might see an im for the accusative singular. Next, what they say is that for the ablative singular, you might see the letter I as the ending. You're used to seeing the letter E there, but for some nouns, you might see the letter I. And if the third declension noun is a neuter noun that ends in R, AL, or AR, also for that kind of noun, you can have the letter I as your ablative singular ending. Okay, notice that all these changes that I'm talking about, all these special endings, they all involve the letter I. Okay? Again, this is called I-stem nouns of the third declension, or third declension I-stems. So just think about the letter I, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Continuing on to section 155, they talk about special plural endings. Again, this is the same thing here. It's I-stem nouns of the third declension. So let's turn the page. And at the very top of page 52, you'll see that these nouns can have, in the genitive plural, instead of just um, these forms will end with ium. Okay? And in the accusative plural, instead of es, which you're used to, you might see is. And now they're going to try to tell us what kinds of third declension nouns will have these characteristics. They have three numbers here, 1, 2, and 3. Number 1 says nouns in is or es, that is the nominative singular, having the same number of syllables in the nominative singular and genitive singular. So an example of that kind of third declension noun would be navis. Okay, navis is the nominative singular, and navis is the genitive singular. They have the same number of syllables in the nominative and genitive singulars. That's a classic example of one of these I-stem nouns of the third declension. Number 2, most nouns in ns or rs, like the word mons, M-O-N-S, which means mountain. That's an example of that. Number 3, monosyllables in s or x, that is ending with s or x, following a consonant. We have at least one in our new vocabulary for this lesson. If you look down at the list, you'll see parse, which means part, side, or direction. So you have the letter R, which is a consonant, followed by the letter S as your ending. Also, pons pontus means bridge. So those are two examples of third declension nouns that meet that characteristic or that criterion. And then really this isn't organized very well, but I'm just trying to cover what they're saying here in the book. Lastly, they say neuters in E, AL, or AR have IUM in the genitive plural and IA in the nominative and accusative plural. Okay, remember that it doesn't matter what declension a noun is from. If it's neuter, the nominative plural ending will always be the letter A. Okay, so we have words like animal, A-N-I-M-A-L, which means animal. And animal ends with A-L, and it's neuter. So instead of having A at the end and getting animala, you'll get IA, you'll get animalia. Again, the letter I is finding its way in to some of these forms because this is all about I stem nouns. Okay, so I've told you about some of the specific endings that you'll be seeing. Let's review those briefly, and then I want to show you something else. So in the accusative singular, you might see IM. In the ablative singular, you might see the letter I as the ending. In the nominative singular, if it's neuter, you might see IA as the ending, like animalia. In the genitive plural, you might see IUM instead of just UM. So for the word nawis, which means ship, the genitive plural will be nawium, not nawum. And in the accusative plural, you might see IS instead of ES. So those are the endings you might see for I stem nouns of the third declension. But instead of telling you to just go and memorize these forms, I would like to tell you why it is like that. In other words, why do I stem nouns of the third declension have these special endings? And in order to tell you more about that, I'd like you to turn to the appendix. Go ahead and turn to page 249 in the appendix. And you'll see here at the bottom of the page in section 6, you will see hostis, nawis, mons, and nox. 4 examples of third declension I stems. When I was a less experienced student of Latin myself, I never understood this. I never understood why third declension I stems have the forms that they have. And then it all made sense after I did some research. The reason they're called I stems is because there's actually an I in the stem. Okay, the genitive stem of these nouns ends with the letter I. Now you might say, hey, Mr. Lenny, that's weird. How can these nouns have I at the end of the stem? That's totally abnormal, right? Well, just hear me out and I'll explain. Latin is part of a language family called Indo-European languages. Indo makes reference to India, and European, of course, is Europe. So Indo-European is a family of languages stretching from India all the way to Europe. It's a very wide swath of land. And there was a language, sort of a mother language, that all of these Indo-European languages come from, and that's called Proto-Indo-European. Linguists like to try to study all the Indo-European languages, and they try to reverse engineer them and see if they can figure out what the Proto-Indo-European language sounded like or looked like. We don't have any written evidence of Proto-Indo-European, but when they compare languages, they can try to figure it out. When you see it in books, you'll see it abbreviated as PIE in capital letters. Anyway, coming from Proto-Indo-European to Latin, lots of changes took place in the way words are formed and in the way cases are formed. It's a long story, but my point here is just to give you a little background. So for these I stem nouns, we're going to have something called contraction. Okay, we're going to have 2 vowels next to each other that get contracted into a shorter vowel sound, okay? We're going to have, oftentimes, a letter I followed by another letter I getting contracted just into one letter I, or an I and an E getting contracted together into a shorter vowel sound. Okay, so think about the idea of contraction, two vowels getting contracted into one vowel. And the way this works is, let's take, for example, the noun nawis in the second column that means ship. The stem of this noun, if you were going to look at the genitive singular form, nawis, it's N-A-V-I-S, you might think to yourself, oh, well, I'll take away the I and the S from nawis, and that gives me N-A-V. So N-A-V must be the genitive stem. And I'll admit, it does look that way. But for these I-stem nouns, that's really not the case. For these I-stem nouns, really what's happening here is the stem is N-A-V-I. Okay? So the final letter of the stem actually is the letter I. Then we add the ending IS for the genitive singular, so you get N-A-V-I-I-S. You have two I's, and the I's contract together, and you get nawis, okay? So the reason these are called I stems is because the last letter of the stem actually is the letter I. In the dative singular, what is the dative singular ending for the third declension? It's the letter I. So in the dative singular, you'll have N-A-V-I as the stem, then we add another I, and we get N-A-V-I-I. Those two I's contract together, and you get nawi as the dative singular. In the accusative singular, notice they have two forms here with IM and EM. What you have here is N-A-V-I as the stem, and then an EM ending. The I and the E can be contracted down, okay? And I was doing some research on this, and it said that a lot of times the ancient Romans weren't even completely sure about I-stem endings. Again, in the ablative singular, you might ask yourself, why have N-A-V-I? Why would that be there? Because that's the stem. N-A-V-I is the stem. You add an E for the ablative singular ending, and then you get a vowel contraction. So that could be nawi or nawe. In the genitive plural, this is very clear here. Again, the stem is N-A-V-I. Now we add the UM ending, and there is no contraction with the letter U. The letter U does not contract with the letter I. So you keep both vowels and you get nawium. In the accusative plural, same thing with the contraction. You get N-A-V-I as the stem, you add ES. Now you have an I and an E next to each other, and they can contract into an E or an I. Okay, so that's the reason why you get these funny endings with the third declension I stems. And why am I telling you this? Because I want you to know that, for example, in the genitive plural, when you see nawium, the ending is not IUM. It's not that we're taking the stem of NAV and adding IUM to it. That's not what's happening. What's happening is the stem is NAVI, and we're adding the standard, normal genitive plural ending, which is UM, and you get nawium. Okay? So the endings really are not special endings, as the authors of the book say. From a student's perspective, I can understand why they would say that. They would say, these are special endings. Really, they're not special endings. They're the same endings we've always added. It's just that some of the endings start with a vowel. Like in the genitive singular, the genitive singular ending is IS. It starts with a vowel. It starts with a letter I, which can be contracted with the I at the end of the stem. In the accusative plural, that ES ending starts with a vowel. It can get contracted with the I at the end of the stem, and so on and so forth. So that's really what's happening here. I don't want to bore you to tears with all this, but what I did want to accomplish was simply to explain why these third declension I stems have the forms that they have. And I didn't want you to think that there are two endings for the genitive plural, that there's IUM and UM. That's really not correct. So I didn't want you to think that. I want you to realize that for the genitive plural, it's always just UM. There's no such thing as adding an IUM to the ending. The I comes from the stem. That's why it's called an I stem noun. Turn quickly with me to the next page, to page 250, and look at the very top. You'll see animal over on the right. Again, this is an I stem of the third declension, but this is neuter. So in the nominative plural, we're still adding the letter A. We're not adding IA as a special ending. The ending for a neuter nominative plural is always A. The I that's there comes from the stem. So the stem here really is animali. Then in the nominative plural, you add A, you get animalia. In the genitive plural, again, the stem is animali. You add UM, you get animalium. It's not that we're adding an IUM. It's that we're adding UM to a stem that ends with the letter I. In the genitive singular, animali plus IS, you have two I's next to each other. They contract. In the dative singular, you have animali plus, in the dative singular, again, the stem is animali. You add the standard third declension ending of I. Now you have animalii, two I's. The two I's contract, and so on and so forth. Okay, I hope that helps you understand third declension I stems. Let's move on now to the next section. And as we go forth, I'll be pointing out to you these third declension I stems to help you recognize when you'll see those endings that contain the letter I. And again, it won't always be the same. The endings of third declension I stems will vary according to the Roman author, according to the publisher who's publishing a text. You might see them with ES in the accusative plural or IS. You could see them. I've seen texts in which I was using a text from one publisher and another student was using a text from another publisher, and my text had ES for accusative plural endings for I stems, and the other student had IS for the endings of accusative plural I stems. So it really just depends. The idea here is to just be on the lookout for the I stems and to understand, when you see one, to understand what's going on and why it's like that. And I'll help point these out to you as we go along. Okay, let's look at section 157. That's our vocabulary for this lesson. The first noun here is hora, horai, which means hour. Next, vigilia. Vigiliae is like a night watch. When you stay up at night, keeping an eye on things. It can also be used to measure time because it's like 1/4 of the night. A related English word would be vigil. Next, we have the word for summer, which is aistos. Aistatis is the genitive singular. Aistos is related to a Latin verb. I believe it's aistuo, which means to be hot. So it has the idea of a hot time of year. Animal here is one of those I stem third declension nouns we just studied. That's a neuter I stem noun of the third declension. Next is arar, araris, and that's the Saône River, a river in Gaul. Notice that the accusative singular form will be IM, and the ablative singular form will end with the letter I, like some of the I stem third declension nouns that I mentioned above. Next we have finis, which means end, limit, or boundary. In the plural, it can mean territory. A related English word would be final. Next is hostis. That's another I stem third declension noun, which means enemy. A related English word would be hostile or hostile, depending on how you pronounce it. Another I stem noun from the third declension, nawis, nawis, a feminine noun that means ship. A related English word would be naval, not like your belly button, but like a N-A-V-A-L. Mare is next. That means sea. The genitive singular is maris, and it's neuter. In the nominative plural, you'll get Maria. By the way, this is where the name Maria comes from. More I stem nouns on the way here. Mons, montis, which means mountain. Since it's an I stem, you'll get the genitive plural montium. Next is pons pontis, a masculine I stem noun from the third declension, which means bridge. Since it's an I stem third declension noun, you might see is as the accusative plural ending. You might see pontis as an accusative plural. A related English word would be pontifical. Same thing for pars partis, a feminine I stem noun of the third declension that means part, side, or direction. So for the genitive plural, you'll see partium. Nox, noctis is next. That means night. It's a feminine I stem noun of the third declension. A related English word would be nocturnal. Next we have an adjective, duo, duai, duo, which means two. Since the word duo means two, it actually is plural, whether or not it looks like it. So you could say two men, duo weary. It doesn't sound like they agree, but they really do, because the word duo means two. So you could say one weir, but duo weary. And the nominative singular neuter form is also duo. Next we have proximus, proxima, proximum. That's a first and second declension adjective that means next. A related English word would be approximate. The next two words are what we call ordinal numbers, like first, second, third. When you say 1, 2, 3, those numbers are what we call cardinal numbers. But numbers like first, second, third, really they're adjectives. And those are called ordinal numbers, from the Latin word ordo, which means rank or order. So tertius, tertia, tertium is a first and second declension adjective that means third. And quartus, quarta, quartum, again, that's a first and second declension adjective that means fourth. A related English word would be quart or quarter. Finally, we have a compound verb here, influo. It's really just the verb fluo, which means to flow, with the preposition in tagged onto the front of it. So it means to flow into. Influo, influere, influxi, influxum. A related English word would be flux. Okay, now we're moving to section 158 and 159, and we're going to talk about a special use of the ablative case called the ablative of time. And there are two flavors of the ablative of time. One is called the ablative of time when, telling you when something happened, and the other is called the ablative of time within which. And that gives you a time frame within which some kind of activity will occur. Okay, so you have ablative of time when and ablative of time within which. Two different flavors of the ablative of time. Let's read section 159 together. It says, the ablative is used to denote time when or within which. Okay, so depending on the way we use the ablative, we can use it to say when something will happen or a time frame within which something will happen. Okay, so let's examine our model sentences in section 158. Model sentence 1 says, prima hora castra movebantur. Okay, the subject here is castra. That means camp. It's neuter plural of the word castrum. So it's written in a plural way, but we translate it as the singular word camp. So it needs a plural verb because grammatically it's plural. Movebantur is third person plural, imperfect tense. of the verb moeo, which means to move. And also, moebantur is passive. So moebantur grammatically means they were being moved. But we can translate it in a singular kind of way because it's working with castra. So we'll translate castra and moebantur as the camp was being moved. Or we could simply say the camp was moved. If you say it was being moved, that gives you more of the continuous kind of flavor of the imperfect tense. And the area which is of most interest to us right now is the first two words, prima hora. Okay, notice that both of these words are ablative singular. This is an example of the ablative of time when. It's the ablative case being used to tell us when something happened. Okay, so we'll translate prima as first and ora as hour, but since it's ablative of time when, we'll throw in the word at. We'll say at the first hour. So number one says, at the first hour, the camp was moved. Moving along to the top of page 53, we have model sentence number 2, which says, una aestate, Caesar duo bella gerebat. Okay, the subject here is Caesar, and the verb is gerebat. That's a form of the verb gero, which means to bear, carry, things like that. When the verb gero is used along with the noun bellum, which means war, it has a special idiomatic meaning, which is to wage war. Okay, so bellum gero means to wage war. And that's what we have here in this sentence. Gerebat is imperfect tense, third person singular. So it's he, she, or it was waging. And then bella is neuter plural accusative. So it's he, she, or it was waging wars. Okay, remember that the word duo means two, and here the word duo actually is a neuter form. That's the neuter accusative plural form. It doesn't look like it, but it actually is. You might expect it to say dua bella. That's not what you get, though. You get duo bella. So gerebat duo bella says he, she, or it was waging two wars. And again, the subject is Caesar, so we get Caesar was waging two wars. Now we have una aestate. Okay, una means one, and aestate, that's one of our new nouns for this lesson, which means summer. It's the third declension noun, aestas. It's related to the verb aestuo, which means to be hot. And una and aestate are both ablative singular. This is yet another example of the ablative of time, except this one is the ablative of time within which. It's not telling us when something happened. It's not saying at the one summer. That doesn't even make any sense. No, instead it's saying within one summer. Okay, so it's ablative of time within which. It means within one summer. And the sentence will read like this. Within one summer, Caesar was waging two wars. Okay, so this is just a quick introduction to the way in which the ablative of time can work and the two different flavors of the ablative of time. As we go along, I'll continue to point these out to you as we go, so you'll recognize them when you see them. Okay, let's move on now to section 160. This is where we have our translation exercises for this lesson. Let's not do all of them this time. Let's do all of them except number 7. So omit number 7, but go ahead and do all the rest of them. Turn off the recording and do the exercises. And when you're finished, turn the recording back on and we'll go over them together. Okay, hopefully by now you've finished your translation exercises. Let's go over them together, starting with number 1. Number 1 says, Gallia est divisa in partes tres. Okay, the subject here is Gallia, that means Gaul. Est is the verb, and divisa means divided. Notice that Gallia and divisa agree with one another in case number and gender. They're both singular, feminine, and nominative. So Gal is divided, and in partes means into parts. Notice that the preposition in is taking the accusative case here, and tres means three. Tres agrees with partes. So number 1 says, Gal is divided into 3 parts. Number 2 is next, unam partem incolunt Belgae. The subject here is Belgae, that means Belgians, and the verb here is incolunt. That's a form of the verb incolo, which means to inhabit, and the verb incolo is a transitive verb. That means that it can take a direct object. It can generate a direct object in the accusative case. So, and that's what unam partem is. Unam partem means one part, and it's the direct object of incolunt. So number 2 says, the Belgians inhabit one part. Number 3 is next. Helvetii in Germanorum finibus bellum gerunt. Here we see the idiom bellum gero again, which means to wage war. Here gerunt is third person plural, present tense. So bellum and gerunt together will say they are waging war, and the subject is Helvetii. In Germanorum finibus is a prepositional phrase. In is the preposition, finibus is the object of the preposition, and Germanorum is wedged in the middle. That's a genitive plural, which is possessing finibus. So in Germanorum finibus, we'll say in the borders of the Germans. When the word finis is plural, you can translate it as territory. So what we could say is the Helvetii are waging war in the territory of the Germans. Number 4 is next. Una ex parte Helvetia flumine Reno continetur. Altera ex parte Monte Jura. Okay, our main verb here is continetur. That's a form of the verb contineo, which means to bound or restrain or hem in or keep in check. And this is present tense, third person singular, and it's passive too. So continetur will say he, she, or it is bounded, he, she, or it is restrained. And the subject here is Helvetia. That's the country which is today known as Switzerland. Okay, so our main subject and verb will say this. Helvetia is bounded. Okay, now we have an ablative of means telling us by means of what it's bounded, and that's flumine Reno. That means the Rhine River. Okay, flumine is the ablative singular form of the third declension noun flumen, and Reno is the ablative singular form of Rhenum. So what we have so far is Helvetia is bounded by the Rhine River. Let's talk about the noun parse for a moment. Parse is one of our new third declension I stem nouns for this lesson, and it can mean part, side, or direction, several different things in English. So here we have it in the ablative case, parte, and it's part of a prepositional phrase, una ex parte. We've seen this kind of construction before with an adjective first, then the preposition, and then the noun. We've called that a preposition sandwich. You could reword it if you want to say ex una parte, out of one side or from one side. Notice that the preposition ex is taking the ablative case. So let's translate parse here as side, and we'll say una ex parte means on one side or from one side. It's kind of idiomatic. Later we'll see altera ex parte. The word altera means other. Okay, so again we have ex taking the ablative case. Altera and parte are both ablative singular. So we'll say altera ex parte means on the other side or from the other side. Monte Jura is yet another ablative of means. It will say by Mount Jura. Okay, Mount Jura is a mountain or series of mountains on the western side of Helvetia. By the way, on the Study Helps page, I've provided you with several maps to help you get to know the geography of the area we're talking about. If you take some time to get accustomed to the geography of the area, you'll get more out of our lessons because you'll understand where the action is happening. So try to take some time to do that. Anyway, number 4 as a whole will say this. On one side, Helvetia is bounded by the Rhine River. On the other side, by Mount Jura. Number 5 is next. Fines Helvetiorum sunt Angusti. Okay, fines is one of our new third declension nouns for this lesson. That means boundary or limit. Here it's in the nominative plural form. And when it's plural, you can translate finis as territory. So that's what we'll do here. We'll translate the plural noun fines as the singular English word territory. So fines Helvetiorum will say the territory of the Helvetii. Then we have a plural verb because grammatically speaking, fines is plural. Sunt is a third person plural verb of being, they are. And angusti is a first and second declension adjective that means narrow or difficult. So literally what we have is the boundaries of the Helvetii are narrow. But if we want, we could translate fines as territory and say the territory of the Helvetii is narrow. Number 6 is next. Ex genaua pons ad Helvetios pertinet. Okay, the subject of the sentence here is the word pons, which means bridge. That's one of our new third declension nouns for this lesson. It's an I stem noun. And the verb here is pertinet. That's a form of the verb pertineo, which means to extend or pertain. Here, we'll translate it as extend. So pons and pertinet will say, the bridge extends. Okay, pertinet is third person singular present tense. 2 prepositional phrases here. Ex genaua means from Geneva, and ad Helvetios means to the Helvetii. So number 6 says, a bridge extends from Geneva to the Helvetii. Let's skip number 7 and go on to number 8. Flumen est arar, quod per fines haeduorum et sequanorum in Rhodanum influit. Okay, the first part is easy. Flumen est arar. Flumen means river, est means is, and arar means the Saône River. Okay, so the river is the Saône. The word quod here is a relative pronoun, so we'll translate it as which. The word that it's referring back to is the word flumen, which is neuter, and so quod is a neuter relative pronoun. Okay, when we get to relative pronouns, you will learn that a relative pronoun needs to have the same gender as its antecedent. Okay, antecedent means the word that it's referring back to, which in this case is flumen. So flumen is neuter, therefore quod has to be neuter. If flumen were a feminine noun, then quod would have to be a feminine relative pronoun. If flumen were a masculine noun, then quod would have to be a masculine relative pronoun. So you see the genders have to match. In this particular case, flumen is neuter, so quod is neuter. So everything from quod to the end of the sentence is a big relative clause. So here's the structure. It says, the river is the Saône, which blah, 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 and does this and does that. So starting from the word quod, this big relative clause is going to tell us more information about the Saône River. Within the relative clause, the main verb is influit. That means to flow into. And we have a prepositional phrase here, in Rhodanum. Okay, notice that in here is taking the accusative case. And when that happens, we generally translate in as into. So we'll translate in Rhodanum as into the Rhone. We have another prepositional phrase, per fines Haeduorum, literally through the boundaries of the Haedui, et sequanorum, and of the sequani. If we want, we can translate the plural noun fines as the singular English noun territory. So number 8 says this: the river is the Saône, which flows into the Rhone, which flows into the Rhone River through the territory of the Haedui and of the sequani. Number 9 is next. Quarta hora cum primis navibus Britanniam attigit. Okay, we have a footnote here for attigit. Let's not go into the grammar. We'll just simply translate it as reached. Okay? It's third person singular perfect tense, which is a tense we haven't really discussed yet. So just translate attigit as he, she, or it reached. Okay? And the place where he, she, or it reached is Britanniam. That's the direct object of attigit. It's probably talking about Caesar, so we'll say he reached Britain, okay? The words quarta and hora are both ablative singular. Why are they ablative? Because it's an ablative of time when. Okay, so quarta hora is saying at the 4th hour, and cum primis navibus is a prepositional phrase. Cum means with, navibus means ships. That's ablative plural because cum takes the ablative. And primis is a first and second declension adjective that means first. So cum primis navibus says with the first ships. So number 9 says this: at the 4th hour, he reached Britain with the first ships. Number 10 is next. Tertia vigilia legiones tres e castris educabat. Okay, our main verb here is educabat. That's the verb duco, which means lead, with the preposition a attached to the front of it. So it means to lead out. Educabat is third person singular imperfect tense. So it says he, she, or it was leading out. There is no other word in the sentence available to be the subject, so we'll use the pronoun included in educabat. That is he, she, or it. The direct object is legiones. That means legions. It's accusative plural, third declension. So together, educabat and legiones will say he, she, or it was leading out legions. Tres means 3, and that's modifying legiones, so it's 3 legions. And we have a prepositional phrase, e castris, that means out of the camp. Remember that this preposition can be spelled just as the letter E or as EX. It depends on if the next word starts with a vowel or a consonant. If the next word starts with a vowel, it'll be spelled EX. If the next word starts with a consonant, it'll just be spelled with the letter E. And that's what we have here. It's just a letter E because the next word, castris, starts with a consonant, the letter C. So e castris means out of the camp. Tertia vigilia looks to me like an ablative of time when. Tertia means third. Vigilia means night watch. So we could translate tertia vigilia as at the third watch. So number 10 says this: at the third watch, he was leading out 3 legions out of the camp. Number 11 is next. Hostes ad flumen axonam contendebant, quod erat post nostra castra. This particular sentence is divided into 2 parts. We have a first clause and a second clause, and they're connected by the word quod, which means because. Okay, earlier we saw the word quod being used as a relative pronoun. And that's true. It is a neuter relative pronoun, but the word quod can also be a conjunction that means because. Okay, so here, think of the word quod as meaning because. Okay, the word hostes is the subject here. It's nominative plural, and it means enemies. And the verb is contendebant. That's a form of the verb contendo, which means things like strive, fight, or hasten, as in hurrying somewhere. Let's translate it here as hurry or hasten. It's imperfect tense, third person plural. So let's translate hostes and contendebant as the enemies were hurrying, or the enemies were hastening. Ad flumen Axonam means to the Axona River. Today, this river is called the Inn River. It's spelled Aisne, but I'll just call it the Axona River for simplicity. So the first clause here says, the enemies were hastening to the Axona River. Okay, so that's the first clause here. Now we get the word quod, which means because. And now the second clause is going to tell us why the first clause happened. Okay, why was the enemy trying to hurry toward the river? So we'll find that out now. So quod means because. Erat is a verb of being. That means was. It's imperfect tense, third person singular. So really it's he was, she was, or it was. There's no other word in this clause to be the subject of the clause. So we'll need to use one of the pronouns that's included in erat, the he, the she, or the it. We have a prepositional phrase, post nostra castra. Nostra castra means our camp, and post is a preposition that means after, but it can also mean after in the sense of behind. Okay, so post nostra castra will say behind our camp. Nostra and castra are both accusative plural. And the word erat is referring back to the river. So we'll translate erat as it was. So this clause will say, because it was behind our camp. So number 11 altogether says, the enemies were hurrying toward the Axona River because it was behind our camp. So what we have happening here is the enemy is maneuvering to try to get some kind of strategic advantage against the Romans. Remember also that the word hostes grammatically is plural, but oftentimes we translate that plural Latin noun hostes into English as simply the enemy. So we could translate 11 like this. The enemy was hurrying toward the Axona River because it was behind our camp. Number 12 is next. Proxima nocte castra movebo. The verb here is movebo. That's a form of the verb moveo, which means to move. And this is future tense, and it's first person singular. So movebo means I will move. The direct object here is castra. That means camp. It's accusative plural. So the subject, verb, and direct object will say this: I will move the camp. Proxima and nocte together look to me like an ablative of time when. Nocte is the ablative singular form of nox, which means night. And proxima is another new word for this lesson. It means next or following. So proxima nocte could say something like on the next night or on the following night. So number 12 probably says, on the following night, I will move the camp. Number 13 is next. Mare altis montibus continebatur. Okay, the subject of the sentence here is mare. That means sea. It's a neuter noun of the third declension. Also, it's an I stem noun. Continebatur is a form of the verb contineo, which means to bound in or hem in or restrain, things like that. It's imperfect tense, third person singular, and it's also passive. Notice the TUR ending. So contenebatur says he, she, or it was being bounded, or he, she, or it was being restrained, things like that. We have an ablative of means here, altis montibus. That means high mountains. Altis is a form of the adjective altus, alta, altum, which means high. It can also mean deep. Here it means high. We have related English words like altitude. And montibus is a form of the noun mons, M-O-N-S, which means mountain. That's one of our new third declension I stem nouns for this lesson. And altis montibus is an ablative of means. It means by means of the high mountains. So number 13 says the sea was bounded by high mountains. Okay, that does it for another installment of Lenny's Latin class. Remember to speak the language, use the nouns and verbs you know to make up sentences. In your mind, imagine a scene and then narrate the scene by saying things in Latin. And if you do this every day, you'll make fast progress. Okay, thanks for sticking with me. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next installment of Lenny's Latin class.